"You can sit down now, PowerPoint girl." That was the line, said with the smirk of a woman who knew she had the room in her purse and the board on speed dial. I had just gotten to slide 12, risk summary by vendor class, simple matrix, 3 red flags, and Dana Caldwell, our image-obsessed CFO with a vogue addiction and a vendetta against anything resembling nuance, cut me off mid-sentence like I was her assistant reading from a menu. The worst part? The chuckles. Dry, polite, status-preserving chuckles from the VP of marketing, from the new HR lead who'd been there all of 8 days, from the CEO himself who didn't so much as blink in my direction. The projector hummed on. My voice dried up. I closed the slide notes on my screen and glanced around. Dana tapped her acrylics on the table like she was wrapping up a manicure, and just like that, I was expected to sit. So I did, but not before clicking ahead. 1 slide, just one. No title. Just a document preview and a digital signature timestamp in the bottom left corner. And then I folded my hands. Let it sit. Let it breathe. If you've made it this far, do us a small favor, tap the like button and subscribe. 97% of listeners never do, but it really helps the team keep telling these stories. Dana continued on like she'd vanquished some mythological beast. "We're excited to announce that our new vendor expansion strategy is pacing 3/4 ahead of target." She gushed, spinning our bloated contract load into something resembling progress. She waved toward a pie chart like it was a Picasso. "Strategic realignment is about risk tolerance, not risk obsession. You know what I mean?" More chuckles. Another little jab my way. I knew exactly what she meant. I always knew. Dana didn't care about procedure. She cared about optics. Her whole existence was a race to look good before things caught fire. And I was the extinguisher no one wanted in the photo. This quarter's QBR was held in the blue room. Glass walls, artificial succulents, and a coffee cart that ran out of almond milk 30 minutes in. Seated to my left was Charles, VP of Engineering, eyes glazed like a man wondering if his stock options would outlive his hairline. To my right, an empty chair, mine. After I sat down, I kept my eyes forward, chin still, posture perfect. But inside, I could feel the last thread of patience winding into a knot. Not rage, not panic, just cold understanding. A woman like Dinah didn't just humiliate people on impulse, she cleared the field first. And that slide I'd left up, it wasn't an accident. It was SLA or EU Martin 78. The final page in a 6-month maze of revised protocols, backdated approvals, and mysteriously removed checklist items. No one had read it. No one had even asked for it to be there. But it sat, center stage like a loaded weapon on a mantelpiece waiting for the script to catch up. I let Dana finish her monologue about agile vendor pathways and non-linear compliance acceleration, whatever the hell that meant. She didn't notice the man in the back of the room, flipping through a packet of notes, eyes darting between her and the screen. But I did, and I noticed exactly when he stopped, exactly when his eyes locked on the timestamp at the bottom of the screen, and exactly when his brow furrowed like a man who just found a loose thread in a bulletproof vest. 6 months earlier, I sat in a windowless meeting room with Dinah and 2 of her hand-picked velocity officers, a title she made up because compliance liaison didn't sound sexy enough for LinkedIn. They had just fast-tracked 3 vendor SLAs totaling a hair over $15.2 million. I had barely seen the red lines before they were executed. No review, no dual sign-off, no risk protocol validation. "Elaine," Dana said, not looking up from her iPad, "you're overthinking again. These are growth levers. Let's not kill momentum with paranoia." I had highlighted 2 missing indemnity clauses and a vendor dispute history that read like a lawsuit backlog. One of them, Vendor 34B, had been flagged internally for non-delivery on 2 prior deals. My system had auto-generated a yellow flag and required a level 2 review, but Dana had overridden it with her own provisional escalation pathway, another term she invented that basically meant shut up, sign, and spin it on the next investor call. I tried to push back, calmly. "Dana, if these vendors breach, the clawbacks alone." "Oh my God," she cut in, laughing. "You sound like a risk robot. Look, we need speed right now, not fear-mongering. Besides," she smiled wide, "we've already announced the expansion pipeline. It's live. Too late for edits. Let's align, okay? Align was her favorite way of saying, do what I say and pretend we agreed on it later. So I nodded, because I wasn't stupid. You don't wrestle a crocodile in public and expect a handshake. By the following Monday, I noticed my admin credentials had been changed on the contract dashboard. No more auto access to the SLA drafts folder. A polite email from her executive assistant claimed they were streamlining workflows to improve cross-functional agility. I'd been effectively neutered, still the risk officer on paper, but without oversight, without escalation rights, and no visibility on live deal flow. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't go to HR. I did what quiet women in noisy rooms have always done. I got surgical. I started saving everything. Version logs, Slack threads, vendor spreadsheets before and after Dinah's agility updates. I screen captured timestamps, archived final drafts, pulled printouts, and stored them off-site. If I was going to be painted out of the picture, I'd be the watermark no one noticed until the frame cracked. One particular memo stuck with me. Dinah had forwarded it to legal with the subject line, "Elaine doesn't understand modern scaling." It was about SLA Merja PEM 1478, the one that would later end up on that final QBR slide. I hadn't approved it. I'd actually sent back a denial notice citing conflict with Clauses 9A on federal indemnity provisions. But someone had removed my rejection from the system. The signed SLA still bore my name, a digital relic left dangling in the void. That was the moment I stopped trying to fight her in daylight. Risk isn't sexy. It's not glossy. It doesn't get applause. It's a cold, quiet discipline, and the only time anyone remembers your name is when something breaks. Donna had decided risk was a branding problem. I decided to become a mirror, and eventually she'd have to look. They didn't even bother pretending anymore. After the QBR, everyone filed out into the corridor like they were headed to a damn victory parade. Dana laughed a little too loudly, high-fived the marketing lead, and shouted something about steak tacos on the company card. It wasn't an invite. It was a message. The kind where they don't need to say you're not welcome because your silence has already RSVP'd for you. I stayed behind, packing up my laptop slowly. Not stalling, just collecting data. The blue room had cameras. I knew that. I also knew Dana never noticed them because they weren't facing her. But they caught mine. The click to the final slide, the timestamp, the glance I gave the man in the back. I'd reviewed the feed once already. Just enough for confirmation. Not for revenge, for insurance. That afternoon, Slack went quiet. For me, at least. There used to be a compliance tag I followed. SLA approvals. Suddenly, it was gone from my sidebar. I checked the channel settings, archived, replaced with a private thread I wasn't part of. Funny how quickly cross-functional transparency turns into Dana's green room when the contracts get risky. Then came the kicker. New SLA template dropped in the shared drive. I opened it. Same format, same vendor table, same signature box. Except mine was gone. Not blank. Gone. No field, no reference, no risk approval line. Just a warm little note at the top. Streamlined for speed, legal and CFO sign-off only. But they kept the auto stamp. The part that still showed approved by Elaine M. Morgan in metadata history unless someone wiped the root doc. Which no one did. I copied it. Not just downloaded, I mean copied. I exported 3 versions, one raw, one with metadata freeze, one with visual highlight annotations, and then I printed 2 hard copies and slid them into a folder I kept in my filing cabinet under an old binder labeled Non-Critical Vendors, Archive. It had a broken tab and smelled like toner. No one had opened it in years. They were erasing me while keeping my fingerprints on the detonator. See, Dana didn't want a risk officer. She wanted a scapegoat in Spanx, someone who could be looped in later, nodding like a bobblehead while her team spun half-vetted vendor agreements into strategic wins for the board deck. That $5 million SLA, the one everyone toasted after the QBR, it hadn't been reviewed. At least not properly. I'd flagged it in March. They finalized it in May. The vendor was on a 3-watch federal list for subcontractor disputes. But no one cared. They saw Dana's pie charts, her pastel slide deck, her little buzzwords like vendor elasticity and approval agility, and nodded like it all meant something. They didn't notice that the SLA used my old approval shell. They didn't know the template had been reused with a different timestamp, but I did. and I didn't say a word. I sat at my desk with my lunch, plain chicken and a bottle of water, and watched Dana's team clink glasses down the hall. She thought she'd cut me out. But it's hard to amputate the person holding the scalpel. You can pretend she's not in the room. You can delete the email chain, remove the channel, skip the CC, but if her signature is on the bomb, she gets to choose when it goes off. So I watched, and I documented, and I waited. It started with 3 red flags, then 6, then 9. I pulled every SLA executed in the last 6 months. Vendor files, contract review logs, approval histories, metadata trails, all of it. I cross-referenced each with our internal risk platform, comparing timestamps to see what had been flagged, when, and by whom. The patterns were loud even if the paper didn't scream. Out of the 37 agreements processed since January, 21 had no dual sign-off. 12 had blank risk assessment sections, blank, not even NA. 4 of those vendors had open arbitration cases. 2 had filed bankruptcy protection within the last fiscal year. All of them fast-tracked. Urgent alignment, Dana called it. Pivotal velocity verticals. What she meant was, I skipped the breaks so I could floor it in front of the board. SLA Muir Pumperton 78 was the crown jewel of the mess, the one I'd clicked onto at the QBR, the one still hanging in the Blue Room's memory. I'd flagged it in March. A flagged vendor, incomplete disclosures, red line inconsistencies. I had archived a note into the review system that read, pending resolution of 9A indemnity risk. Recommend halt until audit clearance. 3 days later, I was removed from SLA approval routing. 10 days after that, 1.78 was signed. 1 signature, mine. And I never touched the final version. Dana's team had taken my February-approved draft, intended for a different vendor, and swapped in new details while keeping the approval layer intact. They changed the vendor name, the scope of work, and the dollar value. The field that said approved by Elaine M. Morgan stayed untouched. Because in her eyes, I wasn't a gatekeeper. I was a formality. She assumed I'd stay quiet, that I wouldn't notice, that no one else would either. But I did, and someone else would. Because if I was seeing this much rot on the surface, I had to assume what was buried went deeper. I ran delta comparisons on draft versions, watched for file name swaps, and found 3 separate instances where a contract was renamed to mimic a previous review chain. Same SLA code, new vendor, same fake approval trail. All under the guise of streamlined formatting. This wasn't just sloppiness. It was fraud. Elegant, quiet, stupid fraud. I backed everything up. Double drive, air-gapped folder, personal flash tucked into a hollowed-out AC adapter block I kept in my drawer. I wasn't paranoid. I was tired. Tired of being the woman in the corner everyone ignored until the fire started, and then blamed for not yelling loud enough. I printed my master list. SLA numbers, timestamp anomalies, metadata inconsistencies, and clipped it with a black binder clip I'd labeled audit bait, just in case I ever needed to toss chum into the water. And then I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. No drama, no adrenaline, just clarity. She hadn't buried me. She'd left a breadcrumb trail, and I was the one holding the map. From my seat at the edge of the conference table, relegated to the periphery like a forgotten chair at Thanksgiving, I could see him. Not clearly, not at first. Just the silhouette, pressed suit, no name tag, gray leather folio across his lap. He didn't laugh at Dana's jokes, didn't sip the catered espresso, didn't even blink when she used the phrase, audit optional workflows, which should have made any real compliance officer spontaneously combust. He was the only person in that room not pretending. Everyone thought he was just another intern or analyst tagging along for visibility. That's how Dana introduced him anyway. Oh, he's just shadowing vendor operations, no biggie. Her tone had been so dismissive I nearly missed it. But I'd clocked the difference in posture, the way he scanned, not watched, the way he typed with 2 fingers and paused after every paragraph like he was parsing legal subtext. By slide 7, I was sure he wasn't here for the optics. He was here for the receipts. And at slide 13, my silent finale, the one she'd tried to overwrite with buzzwords and bubbly charts, he stopped flipping pages. His screen stilled. His finger hovered. Slowly. Deliberately. SLA Mamir 78, the same SLA Dana had fast-tracked. The same SLA she'd stripped me out of, repackaged, re-signed, and paraded around like a banner of operational success. I watched him lean forward, eyes narrowing as he compared the on-screen signature line, mine, with the internal PDF on his screen. Then he did something subtle. He tilted his laptop just enough so the angle distorted. A privacy move. He didn't want Dana to see what he was looking at. I sat perfectly still. No blinking, no note-taking. Just stillness, the kind that doesn't draw attention, doesn't provoke questions. Because when you set a trap, you don't poke it. You wait. You let it breathe. Dana was mid-pitch by then, talking about how Q3 vendor consolidation would amplify velocity while mitigating procurement drag. She gestured toward the ceiling like she was blessing the fluorescent lights. I don't even think she knew the final slide was still up, untouched, unspoken, sitting behind her like a loaded confession. But I did. And he did. His eyes moved once more, past the document, past Dana, past the scatter of execs checking their phones and nodding like bobbleheads, to me. Not long, just long enough. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. But inside, the countdown had begun. Tick, tick, tick. Dana was in full theater mode now, hands slicing the air, blazer flaring with every spin toward the screen like she was auditioning for a TED Talk on how to ruin federal compliance with a smile. So, as you'll see here, she chirped, our growth funnel is on pace to exceed projections by 38% by Q4, driven by vendor elasticity and lean onboarding. Bullshit bingo, triple score. She clicked again. Pie charts. Click. A heat map with colors so mismatched it looked like a toddler's birthday balloon exploded on the screen. None of it touched slide 13. She had skipped it, but it was still loaded, just minimized like a memory she didn't want to confront. And that's when he did it. The man in the back, gray suit, government calm, raised one hand, not high, not aggressive. Just a quiet interruption that cut through her monologue like a wire through glass. Before you go further, he said, voice mild but cold, could you walk us through the internal risk approval workflow for federal SLAs? Silence. Dana blinked. The VP of marketing turned in his chair like he wasn't sure if this was improv or not. I'm sorry, what? Dana asked, forcing a chuckle. The risk what? The approval process, the auditor clarified, walking forward now, laptop in one hand, thumb still on the edge of the touchpad. Specifically for federal vendor SLAs executed in the last 2 quarters, particularly those over $5 million in value. Dana glanced around the table, the first sweat bead forming just above her left temple. Oh, well, sure. I mean, it's a cross-functional team approach, very collaborative. Risk is looped in, legal provides final review, and of course, I sign off, along with the CEO when needed. It's streamlined now, less red tape. The auditor nodded. Interesting. He walked to the screen, not the pie chart she had queued up, but the minimized window. With one hand, he touched the trackpad, opened it. Slide 13 blinked back to life. A single-page SLA, bottom left, my name. No legal sign-off, no CFO, no timestamp change showing compliance acknowledgement. Just my signature, copied and pasted from a prior version, frozen in time like an alibi someone forgot to destroy. He turned to the room, eyes never leaving the screen. Then he tapped the signature with one finger, just one, and said, clear and sharp, who told her to sit down? Dana didn't move. No one did. The room went so quiet I could hear the HVAC kick on. Someone coughed. The VP of engineering reached for his water but didn't drink it. And I didn't move either. Not a twitch, not a breath, because that was the moment. The one you wait for. When silence doesn't protect anyone anymore, not even the ones who demanded it. The click of the laptop lid closing sounded like a gavel. The auditor turned to the room with a calm so practiced it felt surgical. Effective immediately, he said. We're initiating a formal SLA compliance review pursuant to federal vendor oversight protocols. All active agreements over $2 million with incomplete risk verification are to be frozen for payment until cleared. He paused, letting that hang in the air like carbon monoxide. Silent, invisible, lethal. That includes SLA nominal 1.78. Dana made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a gasp. Wait, hold on, you don't understand. That deal's already in motion. We've booked the value, it's recognized revenue, it's frozen, the auditor repeated, cutting through her with the kind of tone that doesn't invite further performance. The CEO turned toward Dinah, face drained of color. You told us Risk had signed off. You said it was clean. Dana's mouth opened, but no words came out. Just the faint tremor of someone realizing the parachute they packed for themselves was actually a gym bag full of confetti. The auditor continued. All vendor agreements referencing SLA shell templates under your authorization will be pulled for review. If digital signature replication is confirmed without audit trail continuity. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The room was still. He glanced in my direction. Ms. Morgan, I'd like you to remain for follow-up. We'll need access to your revision logs and internal communications archive. I nodded once. No victory smirk, no lean-back smugness, just the bare minimum movement to say, I'm ready. Dana, meanwhile, looked around the table like she was searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. Wait, surely this can be handled internally. We don't need to escalate this to... We're already escalated, the auditor said flatly, and for the integrity of the process, I'll ask you to step out. Dana stood, stiff and stunned. No eye contact, no dramatic exit. Just the hollow shuffle of heels on carpet and the quiet hiss of the door as it closed behind her. And then, for the first time in months, the room looked at me. I opened my laptop, navigated to the folder I'd labeled quietly, unassumingly, Contract Cleanups, Rev C. Inside were 6 months of breadcrumbs. Every doc, every change, every timestamp. The binder clip file was beside me, untouched, but I could already feel its weight shift the room before I even picked it up. The CEO cleared his throat. Elaine, why didn't you say anything sooner? I didn't answer right away. I clicked a file, highlighted a string of metadata, turned the screen so the auditor could see it. He nodded. Then I turned back to the table. I did, I said quietly, just not in the way anyone was listening. The rest of the meeting unraveled like old tape, slow, awkward, panicked. Legal was pulled in. Procurement pulled out folders they hadn't opened in months. Someone whispered, criminal exposure into a muted phone. The head of finance asked if Dana would still present at the next investor sync, and the CEO just stared through him like glass. The fire had finally caught. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My receipts were fluent in every language they spoke. The next Monday, my login access was fully restored. Without fanfare, without announcement, just a quiet ping in my inbox that said, access reinstated. Let us know if anything's missing. I already knew what was missing. Oversight, and I had every intention of rebuilding it brick by brick. By midweek, legal sent a formal directive from the board. All SLAs above $1 million now required dual sign-off. Risk and legal, with mandatory version tracking embedded. No more provisional pathways. No more Dana-style agility. They even rewrote the contract intake form to force a risk evaluation before it could be submitted. I know, because I rewrote it. The new workflow was named internally as Protocol EM, not my idea. It stood for Escalation Mandate, but the initials weren't lost on anyone. Dana, placed on administrative leave, no press release, no public shaming, just a quiet note in the org chart that her role responsibilities were being temporarily reassigned. I heard through a thread in legal that she'd hired an outside PR consultant to spin it. Something about health leave and strategic sabbatical. I didn't care. The more noise she made on the way out, the clearer it became that her version of control was always a stage prop. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. I started my week like I always had. Black coffee, blue notebook, system audits before the Slack pings began. But something had shifted. I was no longer documenting in the shadows. I was the process now. My inbox wasn't ignored anymore. My comments didn't get steamrolled. When I flagged something, people asked why instead of what's your problem. I updated the master checklist, our old risk approval sequence doc, which had gathered digital dust in the shared drive for years. I added 2 new steps, one for metadata integrity, one for audit tagged templates. I didn't add a comment. I didn't add a signature, just saved it and watched. People started quoting it in meetings. The same people who had once copied Dana's phrasing now dropped lines like per protocol EM and flagged that for a full Morgan review. Someone even turned it into a Slack emoji, an actual checklist with a tiny pair of reading glasses. I didn't gloat. I didn't update my LinkedIn. I didn't call it justice either. This wasn't a win. This was repair. This was what it looked like when someone picked up the shattered glass without demanding applause for bleeding. We didn't need louder voices in that company. We needed quieter systems that spoke even when people didn't. And now, they did. 3 months later, the blue room looked different. Same glass walls, same synthetic plants, same flickering overheads, but the air was heavier, more alert. No one scrolled through their phones during the QBR anymore. No one cracked jokes about audit phobia or PowerPoint girls. The humor had drained out with the last quarter's exposure report, along with the last of Dana's nameplates. This time, I didn't present. I wasn't asked to stand or sit. I was simply there, seated at the far end of the table with my notebook closed, hands resting quietly in my lap. The new head of vendor operations, a calm, red-eyed man poached from a defense contractor in DC, stepped up with a training deck open on slide 1. The screen blinked to life with a clean, simple title, PowerPoint Girl Protocol, Verified Process. No one laughed. Underneath the title was my checklist, not my name, not my initials, just the process I'd built, codified, and embedded so deep into the company's bloodstream that even the VPs were now quoting it like scripture. 5 steps, 3 required tags, dual signature logic, chain of custody, SLA index with audit trail triggers. I hadn't named it that, obviously. Someone in legal had. The CEO stood beside the projector, hands folded, eyes scanning the room like a substitute teacher trying to guess who might still be faking attention. He pointed to the screen, tone flat but reverent. This saved us $2.3 million in penalties, possibly more, depending on how the ongoing review shakes out. Murmurs followed. Subtle nods, a few uncomfortable glances. He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew. I didn't speak. I didn't smile. I just gave a small nod once and resumed my stillness. I wasn't interested in applause. I was interested in permanence. After the meeting, a junior analyst walked by me, paused and whispered, "You really didn't say a word that whole meeting last time, did you?" "No," I said. "Didn't need to." Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. Not every room rewards volume. Not every battlefield needs a banner. Some wars are won with timestamps. Some revolutions are paved in metadata and footnotes. And sometimes silence is compliance. Sometimes it's evidence.